Super wild card weekend lived up to its name as we head towards the divisional round with some exciting matchups. You're listening to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. I'm Adam Wright alongside CJ Medeiros, and today we have a great episode in store for you guys tonight. We're going to talk about the Jaguars and their historic comeback victory. We're going to talk about the Giants pulling yet another upset in the past decade over the Vikings here. The Bills and Bengals heading to the divisional round, but they did not look as good as they could be. And Tom Brady's future. And joining us to talk about all of this, we have special guests, both returning to the show. We have Bryan Sierra and Chris Costich. Guys, welcome back to the show. We have some new listeners, though, so why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I'll let you go first, Chris.
It's fine. I'm Chris. So if you've listened before, me and Adam worked on the Brockton Rocks together. I also currently broadcast and produce for Plymouth State University. Be sure to check us out, LEC Network. I'll be calling a game tomorrow night, men's basketball versus New England College. That's basically a nice short rundown of who I am.
What up? My name is Bryan. I'm a senior at William Patterson University in New Jersey. Looking to talk some ball with y'all boys today.
Yeah, and it is a good day for you to talk some ball since you're a Giants fan.
Yeah.
And you're going to have your guest segment about that. Giants pulling the upset and Daniel Jones having maybe the best game of his entire career with 3 total touchdowns and over 300 yards.
It's not even I don't even think it should be called an upset no more, because it's just an upset because it's the Giants. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it was any other team, just not named the Giants, same stats, same player, everybody be like, oh, it's not an upset. You know, they're a good team, but just because it's the Giants and they used to be, you know what I'm saying, bad, now it's an upset. But when they was 6-1, you know what I'm saying, every single game they got lucky or they was fraud. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Everybody said coming into the game, you know what I'm saying, oh, you can't beat the Vikings. You're not gonna beat the Vikings. And now we beat the Vikings. Oh, the Vikings are frauds. So I'll accept the excuses. I'll keep them coming. You know, if we keep winning, I'll accept the excuses. We keep winning.
Yeah, it also helps that you always expect your Giants to win, and you
Exactly.
just favor them over every team. So
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're gonna get straight into it. And the Jaguars, they wound up beating the Chargers 31-30 after falling down 27-0 towards the end of the second quarter. Their comeback was the third largest comeback in NFL history, and
NFL postseason history.
Right, you're right. That's what I meant. So guys, was this game the Jaguars winning it or the Chargers more losing it? Bryan, I'll start with you.
I think it's a little bit of both. Chargers up 27-0. I feel like they kind of got comfortable, as any team in the NFL kind of would get comfortable being up 27-0. You're not really expecting any team to come back. That probably only really happened with the Vikings-Lions game. I know the Jaguars, they're a good team. They have playmakers everywhere, and Trevor Lawrence is a dog. I mean, like, I knew he was nice going into the game, but he was just, at first he threw like 3 picks starting off the game. I'm like, he's getting exposed. Whatever, the Jags are going to be the Jags. First round, like, I thought they were like, it was a miracle that they even made the playoffs. I thought that they were just happy being there, but they're like, no, we want more. And just, you know what I'm saying, down 27-0, they didn't flinch, they didn't blink, just came back, and, you know what I'm saying, crazy win. I thought the craziest part of it, though, when the Chargers were up 27-0, there was a better, I saw it on like Bleacher Report, I think, or Overtime or something like that, where it was like a sport, like some sports better. But the Chargers were up 27-0, put a $1.4 million bet for the Chargers to win it while they were minus 12,500 at the time to only win like 10 grand. So imagine putting $1 million, $1.5 million to only win 10 grand, and you lose. Like,
Yeah, Bryan, I saw that too. I thought that was
God.
pretty ridiculous.
No, I don't want to say he deserves it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just insane luck. Like, I don't know if I would just stop betting anything after that. Like, I would not make another bet after that. I don't even know if he has money to bet after that. Like, that's probably everything he had. So it's like I understand why he did it. It's like, who's gonna come back 27-0? Like, that maybe only happens once every like 20 years. And it already happened like once this year already. So I doubt it's gonna happen again. In his mind, he thought it was an easy $10,000, but man, but talk about tough luck.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I mean, definitely, I feel like it's more on the Chargers because Chargers end up always finding a way to lose these types of games, as we've seen the last few years now. And when you don't have a run game and you're up 27-0, you really handcuff yourself. Especially when you have a guy like Austin Eckler who gets a ton of touches. But the problem is I saw one stat, he never had more than 20 carries in a game in his entire career. And when you couple that in to how well the Jaguars defense was playing in the second half, I mean, it leaves a huge opportunity for the Jaguars offense to build momentum off of what their defense is doing. And on top of that, the Chargers defense, I mean, how do you blow that? How do you blow that? Because obviously you can look at Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense, whatnot, but if you don't have anything going on the run game, you're left with third and long, third and medium. And sure, Herbert can make those throws, but you can't expect someone to make a 3rd and 10 throw every single drive, or 3rd and 10, third and long, regardless. You just can't expect someone to make a throw like that every single time. And that leaves the Chargers to only get 3 points in the second half. And you open the door for the Jaguars to lay their balls on the friggin' field and go for 2 to leave yourself with a field goal to win the game. I mean, amazing game management by Jaguars and Doug Peterson, first of all, to even try to do that in the first place. And so, I mean, I guess that's my take on it. So, I think Chargers really just lost this one.
And can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
The week before, I saw that the Chargers really didn't have anything to play for, and they start all of their starters. You know, like the Giants were in the same boat, and they benched everybody. Bryan, they didn't want to take any risks getting anybody injured because I don't know if the Chargers were in a similar situation that if they won, they wouldn't go up a seed. If they lost, they wouldn't go down a seed. I think they're in a position where if they won or lost, they're going to be locked in to play at their seed no matter what. And I think Brandon Staley's their head coach. He sends everybody out. He's like, we're playing to win. We're not going to play scared. And Mike Williams gets hurt, and Bosa gets hurt. So now you're already going into the week, you know, without momentum. Like, you're losing one of your 2 star players on both sides of the field. And thankfully, Joey Bosa wasn't hurt seriously, but Mike Williams was out the game. He couldn't even play this game. I'm pretty sure he would have made somewhat of an impact this game, whether if they won or lost. You know, that's somebody that you want to have on your team healthy playing. That's not somebody on your team that you want out. So I kind of want to blame the head coach, not for playing his players, but not having them on a pitch count like I think he should have.
Yeah, Staley definitely is to blame for a lot of this.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought it up perfectly. Mike Williams breaks his back, and then Bosa goes down for a little bit. He wasn't hugely affected because he was able to play this past week, but on top of that, Bosa getting 2 unsportsmanlike penalties because he couldn't keep his cool after his team blew a 27-0 lead, and then goes to a press conference, and then to the reporters starts bashing on the referees. Sure, you can bash on the referees all you want, and that's a whole different story. But you also got to be able to keep your cool in the playoffs when something like that happens.
Yeah, that's a disciplinary issue, and that all goes down to coaching as well. But CJ, what do you think?
I'm really tempted to say that the Chargers chargered another game, but it takes 2 to tango. And, you know, we've seen really sloppy games where one team's getting handed a game on a silver platter by a team that's choking and they can't seal the deal. So I will give props for the Jaguars for turning it around as well. You know, their defense clamping down and their offense ramping up the production. And if you're the Chargers, I got a question. How does Brandon Staley still have a job? How? I mean, the Chargers fans literally want him dead for just breathing. And then he goes and does this. I mean, you can make your token sacrifices of the offensive coordinator and your quarterback's coach, but still won't fix the underlying issue. And I'll try to keep it brief, but there is one more thing. I know everyone views him as a top 10 quarterback, but I think it's high time we have a talk about Justin Herbert. I don't think he's the guy. Everybody says he's the next big thing. I view him as the next Matt Stafford. He'll stuff the stat sheet, but you're not going to win with him. And you could say coaching as much as you want, but I haven't seen anything. Like, he's missed the playoffs his first 2 seasons, and then he gets in, and this happens, and he's a one and done. Like, I know people say it's early yet, but I mean, but I'm not saying they move on from him, because it'd be stupid if you did, because it's just not worth it. But I think it's time to pump the brakes on the Herbert hype.
I don't know about that.
So you're going back and forth here, talking about the Jaguars and the Chargers. Which is it?
It was
the Jaguars win, or so a little bit of both?
Yeah, it was literally a little bit of both. But I'm just saying, I don't know if Herbert's that guy. I really don't.
All right.
Especially if they miss the playoffs next year and go one and done, then I don't know what to tell you.
I think that you make a good point about that he could be the next Matt Stafford. But the thing with Stafford was that, sure, he was stuffing the stat sheet, but he also played on the Lions. Throw him on, and we saw how he did with the Rams last year. Granted, he sucked this year, and we saw what he could do with the Rams last year with how loaded of an offense that was and how amazing of a team that the Rams were last year. So I don't know. You throw Justin Herbert with a good coach, a coach that's actually capable of not blowing a 27-0 lead, then I think that.
Okay, hear me out, but just look at his stats from that game. I mean, are you familiar with them? Because he had a completion percentage of 58%, 273 passing yards, and 1 touchdown for a passer rating of 84. That's not what you want, especially for a quarterback who's heralded as top 10, fringe top 5.
All right, so I don't think I have too much to add. I think a lot of you guys pretty much hit the nail on the head here with most of this game. I think the only thing I would add, giving the Jaguars some credit, is, and I alluded to this a little bit before the show, the Jaguars were kind of a team that seemed like they were just happy to be there. And they were a team that really, I mean, it's their first time, playing at a high level. And I felt that was going to get to them. And it did. It did. Boy, did it. 4 picks in the first half.
I also want to mention 2 of those picks weren't really Lawrence's fault either.
Yeah, there's that as well. It wasn't his fault. Just the way I look at it, when you throw 4 picks, chances are there's a trend going there, right? And 2 of them probably weren't his fault, but at one point you start looking at it. But to go for him from so bad to so great, this is why I don't really like to look at just the final stats in a game. If you look at it and it says 4 picks, 4 touchdowns, like, oh, he was just okay. But he started out so bad and he figured it out and brought the team all the way back. And he did it with all season, really, with his top wide receiver being Christian Kirk, who's more of, at least during his career, he's been more of a wide receiver 2. Kind of the same with Zay Jones being more of a wide receiver 3. But he's been able to make his pieces that much better, lead his team to the playoffs, and get a playoff victory. I mean, I just got to give Trevor Lawrence all the credit in the world. He figured it out. It wasn't his best night at first. Clearly the nerves got to him, but he figured things out, man. And that is the sky is the limit for this kid. It really is, especially being on an imperfect Jaguars team. It's only supposed to get better considering they're getting Calvin Ridley next year. But I did want to move on. So we're going to change gears. And we are going to get to Bryan's guest segment, where we're going to talk about the Giants, who pulled the upset over the Vikings That is next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football. They're saying it's a catch. This is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins. Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright with CJ Medeiros, special guest Bryan Sierra and Chris Costich. All right, so we are on to Bryan's guest segment where we're going to talk about Giants and their victory over the Vikings. So, Bryan, what do you got?
I was called a madman. You know what I'm saying? I was called a madman at the beginning of the year. Giants going to make the playoffs. You're delusional. They're not going to win more than 6 games. All right, whatever. We're going to work. You know what I'm saying? Make the playoffs, or you guys are going to get bounced. Insanity run. Giants win. Oh, the Vikings are fraud. You guys are going to get smoked by the freaking Eagles. Divisional game. You know what I'm saying? Like the Giants, for me, they're the team to beat. And I kind of have a Bengals vibe to them from last year. Last year, the Bengals snuck into the playoffs, and not really snuck in, but they weren't really a team making a lot of noise. Like, people weren't really worried about them. And then they show up to the Super Bowl. Then now people, or they start winning, and people are like, oh, this is a hot team. This is going to be the team to beat in the playoffs right here. And I'm getting that vibe from the Giants just a little bit. They're kind of under the radar. People know that they're a team. If they stick around, they could win these games. But they're also a team that could blow the doors open if you let them. Brian Dable, unhandily, he should get coach of the year. Like, I don't really think that there's a coach, maybe Doug Peterson, but the Giants have the worst receiving corps in the NFL. Name me one of these receivers that'll start on any NFL team. Richie James, who was signed in the offseason to be a punt returner. Isaiah Hodgins, who was claimed off of waivers sometime in November. And Darius Slayton, a 5th-round pick from 4 years ago. The Giants are making it happen with receivers who you really didn't think that weren't even the best receivers coming into the year. Coming into the year, their best receivers would have been Kadarius Toney, who got traded, Sterling Shepard, who got hurt, Wan'Dale Robinson, who they drafted but got hurt, Kenny Golladay, who got a big $72 million contract. He's been disappearing since recently. Daniel Jones, everybody had questions on him, but I think he kind of proved himself this game coming up. He went 24 for 35, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, with a 114 rating. His rushing went crazy. He had 17 carries for like 80 yards. His longest run was 15 yards. And I saw a stat that he was like the first player in playoff history to have 300 passing yards and with multiple touchdowns and like 70 rushing yards. The first player in NFL history in the playoffs to get a win and do that. He's and only people who have did that, I think, were like Josh Allen and one other person, but they didn't win the games. Saquon Barkley is a dog, you know what I'm saying? On the stat sheet, it didn't really show that he went crazy, but he had 100 total yards, 53 rushing, and like 58 receiving. But he made plays when they mattered. To start off the drive, to start off the game, the Vikings run down the field and score easily. So I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be a long game. The Giants come right back, 30-yard rip by Saquon Barkley, right up the sideline. Team goes crazy, O-line goes crazy, and their defense looking a little bit suspect. You know, Justin Jefferson, to start off the game, I thought he was gonna go crazy. He was locked up rest of the game. He was not a factor. Dalvin Cook locked up, not a factor. Kirk Cousins was exposed. He wasn't a factor. Coming into the Eagles game, I hope the Giants could, rely on their defense a little bit more. Everybody talks about, the defense wasn't that bad this game. I didn't like how it was a shootout because the Giants aren't really that kind of team to win these shootout kind of games. The Giants are a team that'll win by keeping it close. And in the fourth quarter, they're just going to be the better coach, more disciplined team at the end of the day. I don't really like how they're going into shootouts. I don't think that's their game. But Daniel Jones, he's a dog, man. Like what he's doing this with receivers who aren't really, you know what I'm saying? They're good receivers. I love these receivers to death, but they're not no Stephon Diggs. They're not AJ Browns. You know what I'm saying? So wait till the all season once Daniel Jones gets his weapon and Saquon Barkley back with a few more pieces on defense, gonna be a problem.
Yeah, the way the team is built, it's been at least this season, it's been kind of more of just kind of managing the game through the passing offense, and then letting Saquon Barkley control the game, control the clock. When you're able to run the ball effectively, then you can control the clock, and also play serviceable defense. That's really what got the Giants to this level. They don't try to be anything that they're not. And Daniel Jones has proven to be at this point a player where if he has the pieces, then he could potentially be a starting quarterback in this league. So they gotta give him some help. And I do see a team in over in Arizona who's shopping a veteran wide receiver that you might like, in DeAndre Hopkins, who should fetch not too bad of a price, given he's a veteran. He was just suspended for a third of the year. That's a possibility. But Chris, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, we could say the Vikings are frauds and all that, but I mean, Giants came to play. I mean, even the Vikings didn't even have like a terrible game. I mean, they didn't commit any turnovers or anything like that. There was one stat that I saw. It was, hold on, I'm trying to pull it up right now. But it was the first time that a team had committed no turnovers. Hold on, I sent it to my buddy's group, or our group chat the other day, and it was I can't find it right now.
Do you know off the top of your head?
I can't know off the top of my head. It was the first team in NFL history that went. Yeah, I can't find it right now. But it was first team in NFL history or in postseason play that had 0 turnovers and something else, and ended up losing the game. And I think in that, I mean, the Vikings' biggest problem was always going to be their defense. Obviously, the offense, they have Kirk Cousins that doesn't play well other than 1 p.m. and Justin Jefferson, and the Giants were able to hold them down to 24 points and whatnot. But like you said, Bryan, once they get more pieces on defense and coaching too, I mean, look at where they were last year with Joe Judge. Here they are with Brian Daboll. Coaching does so much, and Brian Daboll has made Daniel Jones into now a top 15 quarterback in the league. And Saquon's actually now healthy as well. Saquon's playing to the best of his ability, starting to get into his prime, or not even into his prime. Yeah, you could argue, but playing like he should be in his prime. And at this point, Giants playing the Eagles next week, lost the Eagles twice this year. It's hard to beat a team 3 times.
That's what I'm saying.
It's possible.
And I have a question for you guys, because you guys are all Patriots fans. You know, when Joe Judge was on the Giants, he was like the most hated man in New York. I'm like telling you, like nobody claimed this man. He was like a fraud.
We don't like him here either.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Like he came in, ruined the offense. He set the offense back 50 years. When he left, it was like we won a Super Bowl. Everybody loved it. Everybody was ecstatic. Then you get Brian Daboll, who with you could argue a worse roster than he had last year. Flip the team a complete 180. It's like a whole different team, a whole different brand of football the Giants are playing. So I just wanted to know your opinion on Joe Judge and what do you think he's done for you guys?
Joe Judge is a special teams coach, and that's all he'll ever be.
Yeah. I think we might move him to special teams coach, and Ackord might be demoted to assistant special teams, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would probably be the better. I mean, there's
Scott Zolak said
explain
something like
everything.
That. Yeah, Patriots never really were horrible on special team. Like they usually had a pretty solid special teams group up until this year. So, and obviously that showed last week of the season, 2 returns for a touchdown. Like, how the hell do you let that happen with a playoff berth on the line?
Yeah, it's like the special teams it's usually good for them. Like that's usually one of their strengths, but this year it was kind of a weakness, and that was a problem. And that starts with putting Joe Judge in the right spot, which is not calling offensive plays, having him call special teams plays, because he's actually pretty solid at that. But I wanted to stick to the topic of the Giants this past weekend. But CJ, what do you think about this team?
I picked the Vikings to win, even though I thought they were fraudulent. And honestly, Giants are legit. There's no two ways around it. I mean, they exposed the Vikings. And honestly, I know the Eagles have the best record and they're all high and mighty. But if I'm Philly, I'm not looking past them, because not only are the Giants legit, divisional games are always tough. You know, like no matter who, like you're always going to get their best fight. And if the Giants catch the Eagles sleeping, I would not rule out an upset, because teams like in 1 and 2 seeds, well, much like Philly, sometimes they have the unfortunate arrogance to look past their opponents. And believe you me, you do not look past the Giants. That's really all I got.
I just found the stat I was just talking about. So per Opta stats, the Vikings are the only team in the Super Bowl era to complete at least 80% of their passes, no turnovers, no sacks, and still lose in regular or postseason. NFL teams have been 47-0 in the Super Bowl era when doing all that in a game before the other day.
Well, there you go for the Vikings. I wanted to touch on Kirk Cousins a little bit. It's been an ongoing debate like all season between myself and Tuck on whether or not Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback. So much, and it got so out of hand that I decided, you know what? I'm just going to whip up a list, and it's labeled quarterbacks better than Kirk Cousins. And I don't know, man. I think I might want to add Danny Dimes to that list after this past week.
You probably should.
But in all seriousness, looking towards next week, and we will go more in depth previewing these matchups for our Friday episode. But like the Eagles this year have been a team where if they're not blowing you out, they're barely getting out alive. In fact, in a lot of the closer games they've been punched in the mouth and they never recover. For example, the Washington game earlier this year, they absolutely got smothered, and they were never able to recover from that. And then it took them a week for them to actually figure things out again, because they fell down to the Colts and they very nearly until the last second lost to them. So this is a team that, like, if you can keep it close, then you have a shot. It's one of they're like, I don't want to call them soft, but they're a team that I would say seems to have trouble with handling adversity. And if this Giants team is as fearless as they were last year, where they stand up to their opponent, they show no intimidation and they act like they've been there before, then you could have a shot against Philly, because they have had issues in close games this year. But I wanted to change gears here and talk about the Bills and Bengals. So these are two teams that have been arguably favorites this year to represent in the Super Bowl, but both showed some struggle in their matchups. We're going to talk about whether or not we should be concerned about these two teams. That's next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. You are listening to the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright, CJ Medeiros, special guests Bryan Sierra and Chris Costich. So the Bills and Bengals have won their respected matchups and will face each other in the divisional round where the Bills will host. However, it didn't look pretty. So both of these teams were heavily favored to win their matchups against the other team's backup and third string quarterbacks, but they both barely won by a possession, both of them. And actually the Dolphins had the lead for a little while there. So guys, I'll start with you, Bryan. Is there any reason to be concerned about either of these teams?
If I'm a Bengals fan, I'm a little bit worried. You know what I'm saying? Even though I went up against the Ravens, the divisional opponent, went up against their backup quarterback. You should be blowing a team out if you're in the playoffs and you're going up against their backup quarterback. I feel like if I'm the Bengals, I'm like, we barely made out this one alive. Bills, they're in the same boat. You know what I'm saying? Divisional opponent against a backup quarterback, that might be a team's kryptonite. You know what I'm saying? If I'm the head coach of another team, I know that if is it Jared Stidham that was their backup quarterback? That was who played for the Dolphins?
Skylar Thompson.
Skylar Thompson, yeah. If I'm Skylar Thompson and if I'm giving the Bills the work and I'm, you know what I'm saying, like what he's like, he might be the worst quarterback in the playoffs. Like that should be a team where you should that should be your get right game. That should be the game to set your team up for the playoffs. Like this is who we are. We're coming and blow them out. That shouldn't be a game where you're like crawling out of the game. Like, thank God we made it out alive. You know what I'm saying? So that's a hit to the ego. That's like a hit to the confidence. And like now I think that they're not scrambling. They're still a confident team. They still know that they're a good team, that they could do it, but they might not be as confident or they might not be as good as they think that they were coming into the playoffs.
Skylar Thompson, a rookie quarterback, by the way, taken in the 7th round, taken 12 picks ahead of Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. So it's funny how both of these teams are going in different directions here with the 49ers and Brock Purdy. But Chris, what do you think?
It's like the year of the backup quarterbacks this year. My bad.
Literally. Oh my
Or third
God.
strings.
And like, I don't know if you could really say like, you have a backup quarterback, you should be blowing a team out of the water, because I feel like that's just not really fair. Because 49ers are just bad example, because that's all around, that's just an amazing team. But and we said this when we were talking about the Giants Eagles, or the potential Giants Eagles game. It's you facing a team for the third time is really tough. You already know what they're going to be doing. You already know what's coming at you. Like, you just got to go out there and perform. And that's what happened with the Dolphins. Dolphins already got the Bills once already this year. And granted, it was 120 degrees in Miami and everyone was collapsing at the end of the game. But really, Miami could have won that game if it wasn't for mental errors from Mike McDaniel or just anyone else. But Bills should be slightly worried, though. I said this on the fan box.
I remember that.
Who is a potential Super Bowl fraud. And I said the Bills potentially, and that's if Josh Allen could keep the turnovers down. And that was during a stretch of the season where Josh Allen was committing a ton of turnovers. And now he's given up about 20, I forget what the number was, but I think it was 20 or 20. I think it was 20 turnovers, and it was a combination of fumbles and interceptions, I think it was. I forget what the exact number was, but it's a lot. That is a lot of turnovers to be giving up, especially this late in the season. So Josh Allen needs to figure it out with the turnovers. And the Ravens, the only bad thing that they really had going for them was the fact that they had to use Tyler Huntley as their quarterback for the game. And Tyler Huntley has shown that he could be a pretty serviceable backup when needed. He's shown that he can win games, and the Ravens defense was pretty healthy as well. So you take that into account, third time playing the Bengals, they're going to be coming out firing, and that's what happened. And the Bengals kind of got saved by last second punch out at the goal line for 98 yards for 6 the other way. But I don't know. Bengals and Bills should be an interesting one. I think we were saying earlier, Bengals were probably on their way to beating the Bills if the Hamlin situation didn't pop up, but never know.
All right, that is a good point about the Bills with the turnovers. That's 3. That was 3 yesterday. This past weekend. Josh
And
Allen.
I'll give Josh Allen credit that one of the interceptions wasn't his fault either, because I forget who it wasn't the best ball in the world, but I forget who the receiver was. But the receiver should have at least tried to reroute a little bit to try to make a better play on the ball. Or I think it was the ball was in the air and he didn't really make a good play on it or something like that. I forget what it exactly was. I have to go watch it again. But I'll give Josh Allen the benefit of the doubt for one of those, but that's still going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he turns the ball over 20 times between interceptions and fumbles, he has 14 interceptions on the year, and that's the regular season, and add 2 of them this postseason. So that's a trend that you might get away with that with Skylar Thompson on the other end, but maybe not with Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes in future weeks. But CJ, what do you think?
This is kind of something that I mentioned earlier about division games being tough. That's really something. And, that's something that I think we should consider. And another thing is how I said how in the playoffs, if you're like a higher seed, you tend perhaps to look past some of your lower seeded opponents. And when you take that into consideration, as well, the fact that it's a divisional game, that's just a recipe for disaster. And both teams, of course, did win. And I would say this is kind of where like the real test begins, because now you're not really in the looking past anyone stage, and this isn't a divisional opponent, so I wouldn't worry too much. The only things I would worry about is one, Cincy's O-line got decimated against the Ravens. And 2, the Miami Dolphins with Skylar Thompson lit up that Bills defense. So it's basically like 2 unstoppable forces coming at each other when you have the Bills less than stellar defense, mostly because of injuries, and the Bengals banged up O-line. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I would say that they're probably going to shirk off most of the struggles unless one team just runs away with it.
And
All right.
I also want to point out as well, especially with the division games, I think you made a great point on the division games. You get a higher seed playing at a home game, and you're playing the lower seed, and how you could possibly look past them. Great example, 14-2 Patriots, 2010, Brady's second MVP year, and the Jets handed it to them. The Patriots that entire season were just making them their bitch. Excuse my language, but that's what happened. There was one game where they beat them 41-3 or whatever it was on Monday Night Football in Gillette. And I think everyone was just expecting the same thing to happen. And then the Jets came in and gave them their lunch.
Yeah. And you also brought up a fair point that I've actually never thought about. But like when you face a team for the 3rd time, after already seeing them twice, like you kind of understand what they're going to do to us in a sense. And, if you perform well, then you might be able to play up to that competition, even if they might be a more talented football team. So that's a fair point.
In all levels of sports too, never mind the NFL or college or just any sort of in any league in general, even in high school. Like when I was a junior in high school, we played one team in the regular season twice, played them in the playoffs, and we lost to them twice in the regular season, beat them in the playoffs. So anything can happen.
Yeah. There's always that. But what I want to bring up is the team to be the most worried about is the Cincinnati Bengals, because they are now missing 3 starters from that offensive line. And if you look back to last year, they had offensive line issues then, but it was more so from from the left side of the offensive line was fine. The right side was the issue. So then they added Alex Kappa and Lyle Collins and Ted Karras. Ted Karras is still there. He's still okay. But Lyle Collins tore an ACL a couple of weeks ago on Christmas Eve. Alex Kappa, high ankle sprain. It's unclear whether he'll be back this postseason. Now they lost Jonah Williams, their left tackle. So you could realistically say they are in a worse spot with their offensive line now than they were a year ago when they somehow managed to look past it and make a Super Bowl. And you can clearly see with this Bengals team, they kind of live and die by their offensive line. When it performs well, they win games. You could see it earlier on in the year. It did not perform well earlier on. They had a lot of new faces. It took some time for them to really gel, and they were very iffy, very up and down. Then in the second half of the year, there was a stretch where out of 6 games, on a 6-game stretch, they only allowed 7 sacks, and they won 7 straight following that. So, now you're losing your 3 of your 5 starters there. I mean, and now you're going into Buffalo, which has a pretty good pass rush, and you're going to Buffalo. So they'll be lucky if they get past the Bills here. And even if they do, it's still going to be a tall task to go up against Ryan Clark and Chris Jones and company in Arrowhead and try to outpace Patrick Mahomes in that offense. So, yes, they were able to work with it last year, but number one, they were in kind of a better situation last year on that offensive line. And number two, they also had a much easier path. They had the Raiders, the Titans, and then their toughest out was visiting the Chiefs. So that was really it on that end. But if we don't have anything to add, would we be able to change gears here to Tom Brady?
Yeah.
All right. Well, next, Tom Brady lost another playoff, and I think we lost Bryan. Yeah, he said he has to go. All right. Well, next we have Tom Brady, whose future is about uncertain as it ever could be. And that'll be Chris's guest segment. That's next. You're listening to the Fumblerooski podcast.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football, and they're saying it's a catch. This is caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Swings it way down the field to Watkins! Sammy Watkins for the touchdown!
This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright and CJ Medeiros with special guest Bryan left. Bryan Sierra left, but we still have Chris Costich for his guest segment. So the Buccaneers did lose to the Cowboys 31-14 and were eliminated in Super Wildcard Weekend. The Buccaneers are reportedly to fire offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich. They also intend to make a push to retain Tom Brady as well. It also wasn't long ago they won a Super Bowl, and also just this past season they finished 13-4. But Chris, talk to me about Tom Brady and his future in the NFL.
Well, I mean, you guys saw the game last night. That was probably one of the worst games that I've seen Brady play in the 22 years of living that I've been on this earth. And like, he was just missing some really bad throws. I mean, granted, the Cowboys defense had a really stellar performance, but even when there wasn't a ton of pressure, like Brady wasn't even hitting a lot of throws. Like, end of the first half, you're at the 50-yard line. Cowboys are playing prevent defense, expecting a Hail Mary, and Bucks have enough time to get one more playoff and get to the sideline, and the Cowboys were literally giving that to them. And just simple miscommunication on like Mike Evans and Brady's part, where Evans is trying to get up the field and then go to the sideline, whereas Brady's just expecting a 5-yard out. It's little things like that, just simple miscues and misfires that just doesn't bode well for Brady's future, I feel like. Granted, this is one game, and he also had the most pass attempts, most pass completions, whatever. But the problem being is that what run game do they really have besides Leonard Fournette? Their run game wasn't really a huge thing. They ran the ball 8 times last night. They threw the ball like 62, 63 times. Brady completed.
Yeah.
What was that?
66. They threw
66.
they threw it a lot. Yeah.
Exactly, because they didn't have a run game, and all they were worrying about was relying on Brady. And at this point and stage of his career, I mean, I don't know, especially looking at that game and seeing how he's going to be on the free agent market pending if he comes back to Tampa, and looking at his press conference last night, the way he was addressing the reporters and whatnot, it kind of seemed like that it was either he was going to leave Tampa or just be done in general.
Yeah. So I'm a little back and forth. I'm a little back and forth on what he should do. It's hard to tell what he will do. But I definitely do not think, given his recent actions, that he should retire just yet, because he just came out of retirement, and also that cost him his relationship with his wife. I mean, you don't go through all of that just to leave after one season, especially the abysmal year that you had. The way I see it, you either stick with the Buccaneers and say, all right, let's figure things out, let's regroup, fix the coaching situation, get the offensive line healthy, maybe get some depth there as well, or you head to the 49ers or Dolphins if they'll have them. Just give it, like, you're at the age where you need a desirable situation in order to succeed, because you're just too old in order to actually overshadow some imperfections like he did during his New England days. But that's my 2 cents on that. But CJ, what do you think?
Now, I don't know. It seems like he's upset with Tampa. I mean, I feel like Brady likely may have said to them, if you want me back, you're going to fire Leftwich. But I don't even know at this point. I mean, it's very clear that he doesn't seem like his heart's in it, especially in Tampa. And I mean, he was engaging in tampering with Miami, and maybe Miami's going to have him after they killed Tua, basically. So that could be something. But I don't see him retiring. I see him giving it 1, maybe 2 more years somewhere else. I personally think Vegas, because 1, Vegas is going to need to appease Devontae Adams after they traded his best friend. And 2, the Niners kind of have Purdy now. And, if he's an emerging good QB, then you don't really want to anger him. So there's a whole lot up in the air right now. Would I be shocked if he retired? No, I wouldn't. But do I expect him to? Honestly, no. Like I said, there's really not a lot we can say. It's all speculation. But I would actually be surprised if he also went back to Tampa. Like I said, I think Vegas is probably going to be the spot where he'll go.
And honestly, one could even say New England. I mean,
No.
that would definitely be a long shot. But when you got Bill O'Brien possibly coming back and seeing the way that Brady played with Bill O'Brien during the MVP and Super Bowl years, they played really well. And Bill O'Brien can bring back that 2 tight end offense that worked really well. I mean, granted, it's probably not going to work as well with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry the way it did with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, but like, geez, might as well try. And it would be great to have someone like Brady or someone like Brady for Mac to develop with too, even to back up. I mean, granted, it wouldn't be the greatest idea in the world, but shit, wouldn't be the worst thing to try either. And I don't think Brady's going to want to go to the Raiders considering how shitty of a – sorry for the language, but the way that the Raiders played under Josh McDaniels, and Brady's not stupid. He knows that McDaniels is not a good head coach. He's a great OC. He's a good OC. But head coach-wise, no.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I think too many bridges were burned in New England for him to come back. Also, Rob Gronkowski outright said he would be shocked if Brady went to New England.
Oh, yeah.
You know, with the offensive weapons in Vegas, I could see it, but the offensive line isn't much better of a situation, if it is, than Tampa. And also that defense. Oh my Lord, that defense blew this year. Also, their coaching, their head coaching wasn't all that good. They're going to need a new. So if he does decide to go there, it has its ups, and it would be kind of closer to his hometown in California, but they would have a laundry list of things to improve on if they're going to contend with him. And I think the only desirable situation, the only options Brady should ever have is a team that he could go to that could contend, not a team that is like, okay, let's stick around for a couple years, rebuild. I completely forgot about this, but apparently, I guess the Dolphins are committing to Tua Tagovailoa 100%. Mike McDaniel has already outright said we're sticking with him, and rightfully so, because he's still a young piece, and a lot of it was injuries. So let's regroup and see how things do, how things do when they're healthy, if they can stay that way. But the 49ers, that's going to be an interesting situation. That it obviously wouldn't be there's no guarantees because they still have Brock Purdy. They also have Trey Lance, who they need to give more of a chance to. He's their 3rd overall pick. You got to give him more of a shot. And if they decide to abandon both players, then and say, well, we'd be crazy if we didn't bring Brady in with this coaching, with this offensive attack, with this defense, the protection that he would have, he would thrive on that team. He would have probably his best season he would have in years, maybe even including those two first Tampa years, because it's just they're so loaded with offensive talent and they're balanced, they're well coached. That would be his best spot, and he's always wanted to be a 49er. He was a Niners fan when he was growing up, so that would be the dream destination for him, especially for his last 2 years. You know, he stays in the league for a couple of years, contends, maybe wins another Super Bowl, and then he hangs it up. But he better hang it up after then, because you got such a great career. You need to end on a high note, man.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, you bring Brady to San Francisco, and there's so many similarities between Purdy right now to Brady's first year. Brady in his first year was basically doing the same thing that Brock Purdy is doing right now. They're just doing enough to get wins. I mean, sure, they had Purdy throw 30 times this past weekend, went 18 for 30, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns. and 130 something rating. And Brady wasn't really putting up the same stats. But like I said, right now, all Purdy has to do is just do enough to get the win. And that's what Brady did in that first real year, the Super Bowl year. And that's kind of all they need him to do. And if they bring Brady in next year, then that'd be a good way for him to develop a little bit more. And that's kind of what happened with Brady, was that he was able to develop under Drew Bledsoe and end up developing into a better quarterback, obviously, as the years went on. But a really good veteran quarterback would be pretty good for Purdy, if anything.
Yeah, that is maybe he could, grow under him for a year. And like the 49ers have been a team that they need to win a Super Bowl, man. Like that team is it's such a professional, well-oiled organization, and they've really made all of the right choices in the past, 5 years. And that's a team that needs a Super Bowl. I don't want to say win now because they're not old, but they're built to win. And if you have that one last piece, the quarterback, that's been their Achilles heel ever since Steve Young retired. If they just have that last piece, they can win their 6th Super Bowl. And I don't know. I think Tom Brady still has it, especially when this Buccaneers team was so dysfunctional this year. But Brady still had a chance at 5,000 yards if he played that full week 18 and threw for 25 touchdown passes to 9 picks. I don't want to say that's a good year because by his standards, it's pretty bad, but it tells me that he still has the potential if he's in the right system. It's kind of just, we're trying to ink out those last ounces of football that he has left in him. And I think the 49ers
this year too.
Third in passing yards
this year too.
What's that?
Third in passing yards this year too.
Exactly. In passing yards, he was pretty much the same. And touchdowns, honestly, if they weren't so why the hell did that? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You had I'm not the biggest fan of Bruce Arians, but you had a offense that was built to go vertical, to throw it deep, or at least down the middle, 20-yard darts. And they went to dink and dunk. And if they had just not done that, he'd at least have 30 touchdown passes, at least 5 more than he had this year.
It's because Bowles is a defensive guy. I mean, Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. There's no denying that. But as a head coach, he's not good. And when you got a defensive-minded head coach and whatnot, he's going to want to do things a little bit more conservatively. And saw that with Matt Patricia, obviously, this year with the Patriots. Just screenplay every other play and just not turn the ball over. And then once you actually go vertical, it ends up being a shit play. And Bucs basically had the same thing going.
Yeah, it's like, and I understand some form of conservative play. You don't want to take too many risks. We see the other extreme with Bruce Arians, but at least it kind of worked. And with Byron Leftwich clearly in his year, they had some sort of conservatism. I don't know how I would pronounce.
But it was a good mix.
Yeah,
it was a good mix. That's the thing. You need a good mix. You can't just be taking your shots off of, like last night. You can't just be taking your shots right out of the 2-minute warning when you're down 31-14. And granted, Mike Evans should have made that catch too.
Oh,
but
yeah, I saw that.
You can't be taking your shots that late in the game when you're already down so much and the game's pretty much out of hand or is already over. You can't just be wasting your opportunities for the final minutes of the game or when the game is already out of hand.
Yeah, it's definitely a season to forget for both the Buccaneers and for Tom Brady. Either way, though, if you are the Buccaneers, you need to try and retain Tom Brady. You're a team that's built to win now, like actually built to win now. And if you lose him, you're back to the dark ages where you were pre 2002. So that's definitely something that they should prioritize. But I do want to move on because we are actually getting up there in time to our fan box where we asked. So we talked about a lot about teams in general. I want to get more to some of the best performers, the individual players from Super Wildcard Weekend, because there were a lot of them. So that is next. This is the Fumblerooski podcast. This is the Fumblerooski podcast by Power 88 and Secret Weapon Consulting. Adam Wright, CJ Medeiros, special guest Chris Costich. So we have reached the fan box portion of our show. So we post a question filter on our Instagram every Monday, and you can respond with hot takes, questions, and more. And we will discuss it and give you a shout out on our podcast. Respond to next week's fan box question to be featured on our show. So the question of the week was, which individual player put up the best performance during Super Wildcard Weekend? It's still a mouthful in its second season mentioning it, but it has been a week that's I kind of like the new Wildcard Weekend. It was kind of.
I don't think they should keep calling it Super Wildcard though. We're at
just call it Wildcard Weekend. It's way too much to say,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep accidentally almost saying Super Bowl. In fact, I think I said that on our last episode. I'll whenever I give like my spiel right before I start, I said Super Wild Card. Like, just keep it simple.
Yeah.
All right. So going into our first responses, we have a lot of Brock Purdy votes. So Connor Fallon, Stephen Parker, and Mallory Kleppel, and yourself, Chris Costich, all said Brock Purdy, and you added Christian McCaffrey as well. We can get to that in just a second. But Purdy, I mean, this is a guy who's been an underdog going into this postseason already, and he's showing out with over 300 yards and 3 touchdown passes, 4 total touchdowns. I mean, this kid he has a great system around him, but he's making his case.
Yeah, and I said it right before the break too, is that he just does the right things. He just does enough to get the win for his guys. And that's all you really need out of a rookie quarterback, that especially if you're the last pick in the NFL drafts, that's all you're really looking to do. You're not trying to do too much. And that's kind of what Kyle Shanahan is trying to do. Don't make him do too much. Granted, like, yeah, you're going to have to make him throw the ball 30 or so times like he did this past week. And he didn't even need to throw the ball 30 times. That's kind of just the way things were going for the Niners in general. But
oh yeah. Do you have anything else to add to Christian McCaffrey? So you said, do you want me to say exactly what you said? We have it all typed out. So CMC, nearly 150 total yards. Purdy does enough to get wins. We already reviewed, but 150 total yards. Anything?
I think the actual number ended up being more like 135 or something like that. But regardless, I mean, dude put up numbers. That's all you're looking for from your top guy. If you're putting up numbers, he didn't have any touchdowns, or he had 1 receiving touchdown. But I mean, he had the bulk of the yards, and that's what Christian McCaffrey does. And thank God he's stayed healthy this entire season, or for most of the season, really, for once in his career. And now he's on the playoff stage and he's performing. Yeah.
And like everyone, even in the speculation on where Christian McCaffrey should get traded before he was traded from the Panthers, everyone was looking at the 49ers because they were such a good destination for him. The run, because they're built for run after the catch. Like the whole team is able to run and catch the ball. And that's something that McCaffrey does with his eyes closed. And he practically carried that Panthers organization. But so there was also Diego Huertas, who also said Brock Purdy, but he also mentioned Trevor Lawrence. And so did Ian Mulhern. He said Trevor Lawrence, regardless of the interceptions, Lawrence, I can't stress this enough. This guy had one of the worst halves of a postseason game I've ever seen relative to their expectations, because I'm sure there's other performances that have been worse, but lower expectations. This is Trevor Lawrence we're talking about. First overall pick. He's been able to drag this Jaguars organization with a couple of decent pieces. Christian Kirk is a wide receiver 2. At least he has been for most of his career. And this guy goes from that to leading his team to a playoff victory in his postseason debut.
Yeah, and I mean, the mental toughness on this guy too. And the craziest thing is that this dude has never lost on a Saturday, high school, college, the NFL. And it really looked like that too. I thought that when I saw that stat, I was like, oh, that's a good way to jinx him. And then 27-0 at the end of the first half, or 27-0. Was it 27-0 at the end of the first?
I'm pretty sure the Jaguars got one touchdown right before the half, which is why I haven't said they were down 27-0 at the half.
But regardless, though, like, you throw 4 interceptions. I mean, granted, 2 of them were really his fault and all this other stuff. That takes a toll on you. You know, you throw 4 interceptions in the first half, your first NFL playoff game. It's his second year being a young guy, but geez, that's hard to come back from. And the only other player that did what Trevor Lawrence did was Big Ben a couple years back against the Browns, and that was a loss. And granted, they also had to have Big Ben carry the entire team, and they still lost by 2 scores. But I mean, in this case, Trevor Lawrence didn't need to carry the entire team the way that Roethlisberger had to do in that game. And Trevor Lawrence was able to overcome all that adversity and all those setbacks from the first half and just play his ass off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this guy really just I can't say enough good things about him. And judging on barring however the Jaguars handle his situation, could become one of the better quarterbacks. I mean, he probably will. We can mention this guy in the same breath as the likes of Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes in like a year or two's time.
And another great example of what coaching can do for a player too. You got Urban Meyer last year, and he stunk. And now you have Doug Peterson. And I mean, everyone has their opinions on Doug Peterson. I thought he was an absolute jackass, especially in the last game that he had with the Eagles, where he benched Jalen Hurts in the last game. Even though it was a meaningless game, you play to win the game and whatnot. And I didn't even think that Peterson was going to get another job after that stunt that he pulled. And here he is with another job, and he's redeemed himself.
Oh yeah, especially after he like, it's so easy to forget that guy won a Super Bowl too. And he's a good coach. He just made a stupid decision. He thought too much about how this was a meaningless game, and he was looking after their health. But you still you got to play to win. It sends all the wrong messages to your locker room. But moving on, we got several Daniel Jones votes. Bryan Sierra himself, Nick Norman saying, "Gimme Daniel Jones. He's been underrated so long on a bad team." William Mantle saying Danny Dimes, and Isaac Zonana saying Danny Dimes, or Saquon. He said, coming from a Finns fan, knowing that guy, he's big time Finns guy. But yeah, I mean, he had the best game of his career, and he's having the best season of his career so far. Maybe not statistically, but you're seeing it with the eye test that this kid does have some potential.
Yeah, and that's same thing with Daniel Jones. He just is doing enough to win right now because that's all he's looking to do. He's done so poorly in the past years. That's when you do so poorly in the past years and you still got the starting role, you're just doing enough to try to win games. You're not looking to put up numbers. You're just trying to give your team the best shot to win.
I was surprised that they brought him back too. I thought they were going to move on from him, bring in a bridge quarterback and start building around him to find the next guy in whichever draft. But it's worked out here. Clearly all they needed was the coaching change, and maybe they could make some adjustments in that passing game, but he's doing the best with what he has. There's also, and this guy really performed, not just in this game, but this year. Eli Turner and Isaac Zonana said Saquon Barkley. And this guy, I mean, Daniel Jones is doing what he can and doing all the things right just to win. Saquon is the guy who's not being conservative. He is the focal point of that offense, man. And we really forgot over the years with all the injuries he's been through about how much of a difference maker he is on that Giants team.
Yeah, and craziest part, he wasn't even the leading rusher. He only, I mean, granted, he only went 9 for 53, average 6 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. And I mean, couldn't say that's like his biggest performance, obviously, but you're getting 6 yards a freaking carry. Like, I mean, feed that man the ball. I mean, I know you want to utilize Daniel Jones and try to give teams different looks. Daniel Jones had 17 carries, but can't really have your quarter. I feel like you can't have your quarterback carrying the ball 17 times when you got Saquon in the backfield. But it works. Obviously, it works, but I don't know if that's going to work the same way against Philly.
Yeah, and that could really kill them at some point because, you know, if the quarterback gets hurt, then the whole operation falls apart. But 17 carries, 78 yards. He averaged 4.6 a carry. That's Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley, he had just 9 carries because game script didn't really work in his favor. It was a back and forth shootout. 9 carries, 53 yards, 5.9 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns. So from an efficiency standpoint, he was pretty good and he scored as well, which is, you know, that's a complete running back right there. He's game flow he's game script proof, and he's able to score touchdowns, and he makes an impact even when it's not really a favorable situation for the running back, which is what you need. So our next votes were so we have a few of them, a bunch of different ones. Other ones were just, there was Dak Prescott from Patrick Williver. Yeah, I mean, this guy had the best game of his career. What did he have? 5 total touchdowns,
something
and
like that,
over 300 yards. I mean, like, as soon as I jumped ship, as soon as I jumped ship.
If you sent that fan box like this morning, I would have said Dak Prescott.
Yeah, well. He sent it like a little while ago too. It was and we posted the fan box at a certain time because we wanted to get this episode out here earlier because just for time constraints. But I mean, Prescott had an unbelievable game, and as soon as I jump ship on the Cowboys, they do that. Granted, it was against a Buccaneers team who's having issues themselves, but they go in against this 49ers team, and from a talent standpoint, they're not far off. I don't want to.
I think my one problem though is like you look at the first 5-6 minutes of that game last night, and Cowboys sucked. those first 2 drives. Like, Dak was throwing really bad balls. I mean, not horrible balls, but like catchable balls. And granted, he did have to deal with 2 drops from those receivers, but that offense did not look good in those first 2 drives of the game. So I think that would be the only concern. But I mean, looking at the way that they played the rest of the game, like they ended up playing the perfect game the rest of the way. And it's kind of hard to really argue with that. But when you look at the first 2 drives of the game, you kind of wonder if that might end up translating into next week. But like I said, that's only 2 drives. And I don't want to get picky. I'm not a big fan of the Cowboys, but got to put respect where respect is due.
Oh, yeah. So our next vote was Brogdon Hill, who said the O-lineman for the Bengals. So if
you got jokes, I see.
So if you think about the fact that they lost 3 of their starters and they still only allowed 4 sacks, I say only because, I mean, if you lose that many starters, you should have more against that Ravens offensive front. And you still win, so maybe you'll have a chance for next week. You have a chance. You're still alive. You could get Alex Kappa back. And maybe if you survive that week, you get Jonah Williams back. No chance that La'el Collins comes back with the ACL tear. But you gave yourself a chance to get healthier for the next coming weeks. So you're taking it week by week. It sucks because I was rooting for the Bengals this postseason. I got a Joe Burrow jersey for my birthday. I just love the player, but it's a long shot to see them make it any further than next week.
I'd have to agree with that, and it's gonna be a good one. Could be game of the year candidate, but
you never know.
Yeah,
it'll still be a close game. I mean, like it might even the playing field a little bit because it didn't look pretty for the Bills in the 3/4 of a quarter that we got of the matchup between the two. Granted, the Bengals were playing at home, but we have Isaac Zonana who has another vote, and he said Wilkins. Now, I'm not sure if either of you saw during that game, but this guy Wilkins. He picked a fight with Josh Allen, and Allen fought him back because he's a tough dude.
No, Christian Wilkins didn't even start that fight. Christian Wilkins was getting a soft block. He just has his arm stretched out on an interception on, I think, I forgot which interception it was. I think it was
Howard's. Maybe, I don't know.
But regardless. But regardless, Wilkins isn't doing anything, and Josh Allen just completely goes pussy mode and starts a fight for no reason.
Yeah, and he pushed Wilkins and then fell. He didn't even move the guy.
And then his offensive line came to his defense, and it was the entire thing that just came at him. And there were, next thing you know, it's 5-on-1, and they're all pigpiling on top of him. It was crazy. Our next guy is Ben Barrett, who said Brett Maher, who is the Cowboys kicker, and he missed 4 extra points. He made his last one, so I guess ended on a high note there. But
Cowboys fans can't be happy with him. In fact, I know a Cowboys fan back home who has a special nickname for Brett Maher. Can't say it on air, but I'll say it when it's over.
But it's funny because one of my buddies last night had a bet that he would have under 7.5 points, and then he just kept missing extra points. And he was like, "Wow, I was not because like Cowboys averaging about 23, 24 points a game. So you take that into account, he's gonna hit 4 extra or 3 extra points, hit a field goal. That's 6 points. So he was like, all right, I'm going to hit the under. And then boy, did he hit it.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. And our last response was Josh Hool, who said, I got to give it to Hawkinson. Guy caught everything despite the loss. And I also have to give this guy credit because he had 10 receptions for 129 yards, which is great. I also have to give him the most credit because he went from one team to another, and he played a big role for both teams. But to be able to transition from one offensive system to another and still be able to produce like it's just he didn't even skip a beat, that's actually pretty impressive. And he had a career year, and I would say probably top 5 this year. I mean, he had a good year, especially given the circumstances for this guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
definitely did.
All right.
But I do want to ask
yep.
you guys, who would you guys say is the MVP from this weekend?
Ooh.
Huh.
Ooh. I would say
Because I obviously gave mine, or my 2, if that, but haven't heard from you guys.
I'd probably have to say I'm trying to think of one that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I haven't had the chance to think about it. I would say I'd have to go with Brock Purdy too, because I mean the guy like without competent quarterback production from that 49ers team, they may not even make the playoffs this year. Like they were 3-4 to start this year, and they've won 11. They've won like what 12 straight games at this point. I mean, it all comes down to quarterback play. If he doesn't play how he is, then they're not where they are right now. They're not even in the playoffs. We're seeing Seattle or something.
Yeah. And for that same reason, I got to go with Daniel Jones, as much as it pains me, because they needed him to step up. They needed him to prove it, and he did.
Yeah.
That's simple.
All right.
I agree with that.
Well, do we have any other thoughts before we end the show tonight? This was a long one.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I'm on, it ends up being your longest show.
Oh, it could be worse. Trust me.
Yeah, it's tough because it's hard to have short episodes, especially at this time of the year. I can't not talk about some of these. I felt weird not talking about the 49ers blowing doors, and we still wound up alluding to it a little bit, but that just tells you. I mean, this is just that time of year where we're going to have a lot of topics. The length of the episodes usually go down. As you know, once the off season hits, we'll still have our topics, but I mean, it's easier to manage the time in the off season. But it's not, I promise it's not just you. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks for joining the show. Bryan, if you're still listening to the show, or if you're listening afterwards, thank you for joining us and talking up your Giants. And we'll see how they do against the Eagles next week. It's going to be wild if they pull the upset. All right. Yeah. Well, that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for listening to us. We have new episodes out on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have all our episodes available on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and so much more. Also, be sure to follow our Instagram at Fumblerooski_podcast to keep up with our podcasts and the latest coverage of the NFL. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Over and out.